Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the MtG, and last period I wondered if anyone would be interested in the behind-the-scenes analysis that I tend to do for things like the jump-in packs as they come out. And, well, it turns out you were interested, and since this became my #1 video of all time, not only have I recently updated that with the new Dominaria United details, I figured today we'd talk about the budget deck meta and help you focus in on what is worth your time and in-game resources to develop as a budget player. But before we get into all that, I am super excited at the prospect of getting to 500 subs because that is going to allow me to do a lot of really cool community building stuff for y'all over on EtherHub. So take just a moment, do all those YouTube things to support the channel, and I won't have to be awkward about it. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. And I just wanted to give a super quick but emotionally relevant thank you to the fine folks of Wizards of the Coast for recognizing our channel with its own card. Thank you so much. You have no idea how much that means. Yeah, I know. All right, so let's start the conversation with something I definitely got wrong. The optimized day one blue-white skies deck. While I stand by the naming convention, I do think this is the optimized version of this deck that you can build using just your day one resources. It has some problems. One is it doesn't really have a mana curve. It has a plateau. 4/4, 24, 4/4. It just way too dependent on its 3-drop slot because that's where so many of the in-theme cards really ended up falling. On top of that, I went with a very aggressive 20 lands on this because a good blue-white skies can run on between 20 and 22 lands. I really felt like between Giada helping us cast so many of our 3-drop angels and the Warden of Evos Isles, that we would be able to deal with a mana assortment of just 20 lands. And the reality is most of the time that wasn't the case. Because again, your primary drop is 3, and then every once in a while you'd miss your 3rd land drop and you ended up doing little to nothing on turn 3. And it was just a very sloppy deck. I do still think Blue-White Skies is going to be amazing for this budget year. I think this deck has a huge amount of potential, but it absolutely needs a rework. And a rework is exactly what it gets here. I needed to open up the card pool a little bit here just to explore the potential and the directions for this deck. So I am including single copies of commons and uncommons from the highly draftable Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set, as well as the Dominaria United set. Now, if you aren't a new player and you were around last year and drafted the Innistrad or Streets of New Capenna sets and have a broader card pool, please feel free to explore cards from those card pools. Always use what you have. The decks that I talk about set a very low standard for what cards you've been able to acquire and are always a starting point. But with that having been said, let's talk about some of the changes that we made here. Added in a Moth Rider Patrol from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Not only is this right on point with the flying theme, but it allows us to have a little bit of a control aspect through a tap down once this small 1/1 has potentially become irrelevant in the red zone. We are also running the brand new uncommon Runic Shock from Dominaria United. This is just a solid removal spell that screams to be used at blue-white skies because of its blue kicker, and in doing so unlocks some Scry 2 card selection action. Very nice stuff. Similarly, we've got Combat Research, a single mana blue uncommon. Whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, or draw a card. As long as enchanted creature is legendary, it gets +1/+1. Now, we don't have much in the way of legendary creatures for this deck, but the ideal target obviously is Giada, pumping her up to a 3/3 card drawing vigilant she angel would just be very, very nice. Typically, cards like this do very well both in standard and historic. Honestly, they're kind of the basis of mono blue tempo, and a card that we will definitely be exploring over the course of this budget year. In the 2-drop slot, we added the common Modern Age from Kamigawa. This allows us to have a little bit of card filtering in the form of a draw then discard. Well, really 2 of those back to back. And that sets up our turn 3, turn 4 to definitely have a more impact overall as we get a bit of card selection. Then in the 3rd stage of the saga, it becomes a 2/3 flyer, so it can be an evasive, aggressive attacker, or hold back with that slightly higher toughness and give us a more defensive position. And right up there with on-theme flexibility is High Speed Hoverbike, a uncommon vehicle artifact from Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. A 2/2 flash allows you to tap down a creature, so it's perfect to flash out in those moments of the pre-combat stage to lock down an opponent's creature, either to keep it from swinging on you or to take away a blocker, depending upon which side of the red zone is in control there of the combat step. Of course, it also allows you to have a surprise blocker, assuming that you are able to crew it when it comes down. All of those cards were basically added as we trimmed down the 3-drop slot. I've kept this pretty broad here, and my guess is instead of having 2 and 3 copies of so many multiple cards, this deck will ultimately end up with the best cards having 4 copies each. But the issue being we're so early into the season, again, just week 2 here, it's kind of hard to tell exactly what those best cards are going to be. And some of those choices are going to depend upon how you end up building this 1 and 2-drop slot based on your individual collection. So it's a little early to make those calls, and by leaving it broader but more shallow, it allows us to test more cards more frequently and figure out which cards are going to be the best. The 4 and 5-drop slots have pretty much stayed the same here. I have added in Coalition Sky Knight from the new Dominaria United set at uncommon. A 4-mana 2/2 is not great, even with the very relevant here keyword flying. What I'm interested in testing here is enlistment, to see if this is a way to maybe use our 1, 2, or 3-drop flyers that have maybe become underpowered and use those to pump up the Sky Knight and be able to swing in maybe past a X3 or something like that the opponent doesn't want to risk losing because it's their only flying blocker or something like that. As you can see, this has had a positive but not overwhelming effect on the mana curve. We're now looking at a 7, 6, 18, 2, and 4. So it's definitely moving in the right direction, but we're still going to need to smooth this out as our collections grow. We have also moved to a far more baseline 23 lands here that allow us to more consistently hit those early drops and just not get blown out by weird mana situations. This is the focal deck for this video, the one that gets the most change. It is going up on Ether Hub by the time you're seeing this, and the optimized day one version is being removed because it is just subpar at best. Through the remainder of the video, we will talk about the meta in a more general sense and the budget decks that are on my radar and should be on yours. All of the other day one optimized decks that I put out have performed pretty admirably, although the lack of depth and complexity in Big Dumb Green means you will probably outgrow it as soon as you start developing your collection in any way, shape, or form. One of the questions that I get a whole awful lot, particularly from newer budget players, is a zombie deck. And obviously, there's a lot of tribal zombies going on, primarily in black, but also in blue in the Innistrad blocks. The unfortunate thing here is I'm just not seeing enough power at the common and uncommon levels, even with the inclusion of a dual color semi-lord. There's just not enough power here to really justify this as a legitimate budget deck that is worth your time and resources to try and develop. But of course, many of my viewers are not brand new players. They drafted the Innistrad sets. They have an entire period of getting jump-in decks, not to mention the zombie support that was in jump-in the prior year as well. So if you have these cards, don't feel bad about building this deck. But the current jump-in pack has a bit of an issue. What you're really after is that rare, most specifically Champion of the Perished, but because of random deck diversity, you've only got about a 40% chance of getting the rare that you're after, and most of this other stuff you might already have. So again, use your resources wisely. This may not be the best use of your in-game resources and your time. And while we're talking about tribal decks, there's three that are coming a little out of focus for us as budget players, all for reasons of support overall. The ninjas and samurai deck just aren't looking to get much support, either from the current Dominaria United set or from the expected sets for the remainder of the budget year. So again, if you have the cards, and we all have the new player experience decks, there's really no harm in playing these, but I wouldn't put a lot of time, energy, and in-game resources into developing them further. Same goes for the green-white tokens deck, Strength in Numbers, although for kind of the opposite reason. Instead of them not getting enough tribal support, they're really getting too much. Green-white tokens right now is dealing with humans, citizens, and soldiers. So many, in fact, that it's enough to make George Takei say, "Oh my." And yes, I know it is probably supposed to be pronounced Takei, not Takai, but that doesn't rhyme, does it? This summer, when the Baldur's Gate set hit for Alchemy, I had dreams of a blue, green, red Teamer Dragon Toolbox deck because of all the fantastic commons and uncommons that came out of that set to potentially make it possible. Now, having drafted the set and played with some deck concepts, it's looking to be much more likely a mostly red ramp package with about 6 slots open for whatever rare dragons happen to fall into your collection. And presuming that this set, Baldur's Gate, remains draftable post-rotation, we will be looking at a deck list or a shell of that deck list very soon. Similarly, if Baldur's Gate remains draftable post-rotation, goblins may very well represent another mono-red tribal option for us budget players. And the really cool thing is, a lot of you guys that aren't brand new to Arena already have the cards you need for this deck. And while most good budget decks are built on some sort of synergy, it doesn't always have to be tribal. In fact, two of our leading budget deck candidates are an artifact build and an enchantress build, most of which are supported primarily from KND. That's Kamigawa Neon Dynasty. Of course, we don't expect to be drafting this set during this period, so those are kind of on the back burner right now, although I do believe these are going to be some of our most powerful, most successful budget builds for the year. So keep an eye out for that when Kamigawa does come back around as a quick draft option. And let's not forget the brand new set that Dominaria United has brought multiple budget decks onto our radar. Defenders and Domain. Both of these decks have real serious contention, not only as budget decks, but it really would not take much for these to become part of the mainstream meta, particularly given the fact that we are at the beginning of a 2-year standard rotation for both of these decks, and really anything could happen. The legendary deck, on the other hand, is already a standard meta contender. Will probably do likewise in Alchemy as well. The real question here, of course, is will it be budget friendly? CGB did an absolutely ridiculous ass-kicking deck list, but equally ass-kicking was the amount of wildcards that were needed to make the deck. And his version is probably not in my future, and maybe not yours either. And of course, the white X go wide strategies that are present in DMU Limited could easily become a budget deck archetype all its own, both now and in the future. So we're on the lookout for that as well, particularly as our red-white samurai deck is not expected to really go up in performance over the next year. And of course, when you put all that together, you get the good. The bad, but still has some potential. And frankly, I'm not even going to waste your time talking about the other ugly decks out there in the budget meta. Wait, what's that now? You didn't catch all that? Well, Matt would want you to know there's a link down in the doobly-doo to take you to the spreadsheet that I use to track and compile all of this data, which you can download with use of a Google account. Just make sure to make a copy, and that way you can edit it all your own. Whether you disagree with my assessment or you just don't like the colors and fonts that I use, you can do whatever you want with your copy. Okay, sorry about the little joke of speeding through the good and the bad there. But the point withstands that I do think you need to download the spreadsheet and start making use of that, because I might not be 100% right. You might totally disagree with me, and rightly so in some areas. The biggest takeaway I would like you to get from this video is that this period we are going to be looking at less decks more closely. The hope is we're going to get a more focused, beneficial result both in our play experience and in our collections. And wrapping things up here, guys, if there is a budget deck list, a gameplay concept, a data issue, anything like that that you would like to see, let me know down in the comments, because otherwise I'm just guessing. And with all that having been said, don't forget, smash that like button like Ronnie J would. And no matter where in the world you are watching this from, I hope you have a magical day. And until next time, I'll see you in the arena.